Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the USS Liberty, watching the stars through the main screen. His ship had been traveling through space for 3 weeks now, collecting data about distant planets and star systems. The Liberty was not a big ship compared to some vessels back on Earth, but it was home to 200 brave men and women who had volunteered for this mission. Jake was 42 years old and had been in space for most of his adult life. He had short brown hair that was starting to turn gray at the sides, and kind blue eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something. His crew trusted him completely because he never made promises he could not keep. The science officer, Lieutenant Karen Lee, turned from her station with excitement in her voice. "Captain, we're picking up some very interesting readings from the 4th planet in this system. It looks like there might be rare minerals there that could help us understand how planets form." Jake nodded and was about to respond when the ship's alarm started ringing. The sound filled the bridge and made everyone look up from their work. Lieutenant Sam Peters, who worked at the communications station, had a worried look on his face. "Captain, we have 12 large ships approaching our position. They're coming in fast and they're much bigger than us," Sam said, his fingers dancing over his control panel. "I'm trying to contact them, but they're not responding to any of our standard greeting messages." Jake stood up from his chair and walked over to the main screen. The ships that appeared were unlike anything he had ever seen. They looked like huge metal insects with long arms sticking out from their sides. Each ship was at least 5 times bigger than the Liberty, and they glowed with a strange purple light. "Put me on speakers to all decks," Jake said calmly. When Sam nodded, Jake spoke to his entire crew. "All hands, this is the captain. We have encountered what appears to be alien vessels. Everyone should remain calm and stay at their stations. We are going to try to make peaceful contact." The alien ships moved into a circle around the Liberty, trapping them in the middle. Jake could see weapon systems on the alien vessels that looked very advanced and dangerous, but he kept his voice steady when he spoke to his crew. Lieutenant Commander Mary Davis, his second-in-command, came to stand beside him. She was a tall woman with red hair and green eyes who never seemed to worry about anything. "What do you think they want, Captain?" she asked quietly. Before Jake could answer, a voice filled the bridge. It was unlike any human voice they had ever heard. It sounded like metal scraping against stone, but somehow they could understand the words. "Primitive vessel of the species called humans, you have entered space that belongs to the Galactic Dominion Empire. I am Admiral Zixathara of the Great Velthari race. You will surrender your ship immediately and prepare to be taken to our home world for questioning." Jake looked at his crew and saw them all watching him carefully. He knew they were scared, but they were trying to be brave. He pressed the button to respond to the alien admiral. "Admiral Zixathara, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel USS Liberty. We are on a peaceful scientific mission and mean no harm to you or your empire. We request safe passage through this area so we can continue our research." There was a long pause before the alien voice came back, and this time it sounded amused, like someone laughing at a joke. "You request safe passage? You are in no position to request anything, human. Your small ship with its crude technology is completely surrounded by the most powerful fleet in this sector of space. Look around you and see the weapons pointed at your vessel." Jake did look around through the main screen. The alien ships had indeed pointed many large weapons at the Liberty. He could see energy building up in some of them, making them glow brighter. But instead of being afraid, Jake felt something else. He felt disappointed that these aliens thought they could bully his crew. "Admiral," Jake said, his voice still calm and polite, "Earth does not recognize your authority over this area of space. We are not citizens of your empire and we have done nothing wrong. I ask again that you allow us to pass peacefully." This time the alien admiral's voice was clearly angry. "Your ignorance of galactic law does not excuse you from following it. Since you refuse to surrender, I will show you why all species bow before the might of the Dominion Empire." One of the alien ships fired a massive beam of purple energy at a large asteroid that was floating nearby. The asteroid, which was probably as big as a small moon, simply disappeared in a flash of light. Where it had been, there was now only empty space and some glowing dust. "That could be your ship, human captain," the alien admiral said. "Now do you understand? Surrender or be destroyed." Jake looked at the place where the asteroid had been, then back at his crew. Lieutenant Lee looked scared but determined. Sam Peters was gripping his control panel with white knuckles. Mary Davis just raised one eyebrow as if to say, "What are you going to do now?" Jake walked back to his command chair and sat down. He reached over to a small panel that most of his crew probably thought was just for ship communications. He pressed a button that was colored red and held it down for 3 seconds. "Admiral Zixathera," Jake said, his voice now carrying a hint of something that might have been amusement. "I appreciate the demonstration, it was very impressive. However, I'm afraid I cannot surrender my ship or my crew. Earth has certain policies about that sort of thing." "Then you choose death," the alien admiral said. "Actually," Jake replied, leaning back in his chair with a small smile, "I choose to call for backup. My friends should be arriving shortly. I suggest you might want to reconsider your position." The alien admiral made a sound that might have been laughter. "Backup? More. Primitive human vessels? Send 100 ships if you wish. The Dominion Empire has ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years. We have destroyed entire civilizations that were far more advanced than your species." Jake just nodded and said, "Well, we'll see about that." On the bridge of the Liberty, warning lights started flashing as long-range sensors detected multiple objects approaching at incredible speed. Sam Peters looked at his readings with confusion and then excitement. "Captain," Sam said, his voice rising with surprise, "I'm detecting 12 contacts approaching our position. They're moving faster than anything in our records. Estimated arrival. Time is 2 minutes." Jake smiled and spoke to the alien admiral one more time. "Admiral, you might want to have your ships take a step back. Things are about to get interesting." The space around the USS Liberty suddenly filled with blinding flashes of light as 12 massive ships appeared out of nowhere. The alien vessels that had seemed so large and threatening just moments before now looked like toys compared to what had just arrived. Admiral Zixathera stared at the readings on his command screen and felt something he had not experienced in over a century of military service. Fear. The human ships were not just big, they were enormous. The largest one was easily twice the size of his flagship, and it was shaped like nothing he had ever seen before. "What are those things?" whispered his second-in-command, a younger Velthari officer named Kextool. The crystalline structure of his body was flickering with nervous energy, making him look like a living rainbow. "I don't know," Admiral Zixathera replied, his voice much quieter than it had been when he was threatening the small human ship. "Our sensors cannot get proper readings on them. It's like they're made of materials we don't understand." The lead, human ship was sleek and dark, with lines that seemed to flow like water frozen in metal. Strange blue lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The other ships formed a perfect formation around it, each one different but all sharing the same impossible elegance. On the bridge of the USS Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison watched the new arrivals with pride and relief. The biggest ship in Neo, the center was the UES Defiance, and he knew exactly who was commanding it. "Incoming transmission, Captain," Lieutenant Sam Peters said, his voice much more confident now than it had been a few minutes ago. "It's Admiral Lisa Carter on the Defiance." Jake nodded. "Put her through, Sam." The main screen switched from showing the alien ships to displaying a woman in her early 50s with short blonde hair and steel gray eyes. She wore a uniform that was similar to Jake's but with more decorations on it. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried the kind of authority that made people listen. "Captain Morrison, I see you've made some new friends out here," Admiral Carter said with a slight smile. "Are they being polite?" "Well, Admiral, they started by demanding we surrender, and then they blew up an asteroid to show us how powerful they are," Jake replied. "I'd say they're not being very polite at all." Admiral Carter's smile disappeared and her eyes grew cold. "I see. Well, we can't have that, can we?" She turned to someone off-screen and said, "Lieutenant Rodriguez, please open a channel to the alien vessels, all frequencies." A moment later, a new voice came over the Liberty's communication system. It belonged to a young man who sounded like he might be from Texas, but there was steel in his voice that matched the Admiral's. "Attention alien vessels. This is Communications Officer Tony Rodriguez aboard the UES Defiance. You have threatened civilians under the protection of Earth. This was a mistake. A big mistake. Admiral Zixthera tried to respond, but his communications officer was shaking his head frantically. Sir, they're broadcasting on frequencies we didn't know existed. Our equipment can barely pick up their signal, and we can't block it or interfere with it. Alien Commander, Tony Rodriguez continued. You have exactly 1 minute to withdraw your weapons and move your ships to a safe distance from the USS Liberty. After that, we will consider your actions to be hostile and respond accordingly. Admiral. Zixithera finally managed to get his communications working. Human ships, I am Admiral Zixithera of the Dominion Empire. You are outnumbered 12-1 and you are in our territory. Surrender now or face the consequences. There was a pause, and then Admiral Carter's voice came back. Admiral, with respect, I think you may have miscounted. Tony. What do our sensors show? Ma'am, I'm reading 12 alien vessels. Total mass approximately 200,000 tons each. Their weapons appear to be plasma-based energy systems, roughly equivalent to what we were using about 50 years ago. And our force? 12 ships, ma'am. Total mass approximately 15 million tons. Weapon systems are, well, let's just say they're more advanced. Admiral Zixthera felt his confidence cracking. These humans were talking about his proud fleet like it was made of children's toys. You're lying. No species in the galaxy has ships that large or weapons that advanced. Admiral Carter, came another voice from the human fleet. This is Captain Amy Walsh on the UES Thunderbolt. Request permission to demonstrate proper fleet maneuvers. Permission granted, Captain Walsh. Try not to show off too much. One of the smaller human ships, though it was still larger than any Dominion vessel, suddenly moved in a way that should have been impossible. It accelerated so quickly that it seemed to simply disappear from one spot and reappear in another. In the space of 3 seconds, it had moved completely around the alien fleet and was now behind them. How did they do that? Kextool whispered. Our best ships can't move that fast even in emergency situations. But Admiral Zixthera was no longer paying attention to his second-in-command. He was watching as the human ship called Thunderbolt continued its impossible dance through space, moving between his vessels like they were standing still. It was not threatening them or firing weapons, but it was making a point that could not be ignored. Sir, his weapons officer called out. Should we open fire? Admiral Zixithera thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. Yes. All ships open fire on the human vessels. Show them the power of the Dominion Empire. Every weapon on every Dominion ship fired at once. The space between the fleets filled with purple and red energy beams, explosive missiles, and exotic particles that could tear apart planets. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human ships just sat there and took it. When the energy cleared and the explosions faded, the human fleet was exactly where it had been before. Not one ship showed any damage. Not one ship had even moved to avoid the attack. They had simply absorbed the entire assault from 12 of the most powerful warships in the Dominion fleet. Impossible, Admiral Zixthera whispered. Admiral, Tony Rodriguez's voice came back, and now it sounded disappointed rather than angry. That was really not a good idea. Now we have to respond, and honestly, we were hoping to do this the easy way. Captain Amy Walsh's voice joined the conversation. Admiral Carter, they just fired on us with intent to destroy. I believe that classifies as an act of war under Earth regulations. I believe you're right, Captain Walsh, Admiral Carter replied. However, they seem to be somewhat behind us technologically. Perhaps we should educate them rather than simply defeat them. Understood, Admiral. Beginning educational maneuvers now. The ship called Thunderbolt moved again, but this time it was different. Instead of showing off its speed, it began to systematically target the weapon systems on each Dominion vessel. Beams of silver light reached out from the human ship and touched each alien weapon, and one by one they simply stopped working. Admiral Zixthera watched in horror as his entire fleet was disarmed in less than a minute. The humans had not destroyed anything, they had not killed anyone, but they had made it clear that they could have done both very easily. This is Admiral Carter, came the human commander's voice. Alien fleet, you are now disarmed but unharmed. Your life support systems are fully functional, and your engines still work. However, your weapons are offline and will remain so until you agree to peaceful negotiations. Admiral Zixathara looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. But for the first time in his long military career, he had no idea what those orders should be. "What are you?" he finally asked. "We're humans," Admiral Carter replied simply. "And you just learned why that's important." Emergency Chancellor Korthulam of the Hive Mind Collective sat in the Great Council chamber on Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Dominion Empire. His insect-like body was trembling with worry as he read the reports coming in from Admiral Zixathara's fleet. The other council members from the 12 different alien species were all talking at once, their voices creating a chaos of fear and confusion. "This cannot be true," declared War Minister Thexus Khanda, a large reptilian creature with bright red scales. "No species can have technology this advanced. Our scientists have studied the humans for months. They are primitive. They barely have space travel." Chancellor Korthulam held up one of his forearms to demand silence. When the room became quiet, he spoke in the clicking, buzzing voice of his people. "The reports are confirmed by 3 different sources. Admiral Zixathara's entire fleet has been disabled by 12 human ships, not destroyed, disabled. The humans could have killed everyone but chose not to." "What does that mean?" asked Ambassador Velktar of the Aquatic Hydro Republic. Her blue skin was pale with worry, and the gills on her neck were fluttering rapidly. "It means," said Chief Intelligence Officer Nexmore, a floating energy being who spoke through electronic devices, "that we have seriously underestimated the human species. Our entire understanding of their capabilities was wrong." Meanwhile, in space near the disabled Dominion fleet, things were happening that would change the galaxy forever. Aboard the human intelligence ship UES Shadowhawk, intelligence analyst Kevin Park was listening to communications from across the Dominion Empire. He was a thin man in his 30s with dark hair and glasses who had always been good at languages. "Admiral Carter," Kevin said over the communication system, "I'm monitoring their emergency channels. They're mobilizing everything they have. It looks like they're planning to send their entire military force against us." "How much is everything?" Admiral Carter asked from the bridge of the UES Defiance. "According to their communications, over 50,000 warships from all 12 species in their empire. They're calling it the Grand Fleet, and they plan to meet us at a system they call Kepler Nexus." Admiral Carter was quiet for a moment. Then she said, 50,000 ships. That's quite a lot. What do you think, Captain Morrison?" Jake Morrison, who was now aboard the Defiance after transferring from the Liberty, looked at the tactical display showing the positions of all the ships in the area. "I think they don't understand what they're dealing with, Admiral. Maybe it's time we showed them." "I agree," Admiral Carter said. She turned to her communications officer. "Tony, please send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need the Pacific Fleet out here. All of it." "Yes, ma'am. Should I tell them it's urgent?" Admiral Carter smiled. "Tell them it's interesting." Back on the USS Liberty, Dr. Rachel Stone was examining pieces of technology that the human ships had collected from the disabled Dominion vessels. She was a woman in her 40s with brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she had spent most of her life studying alien life forms that didn't exist yet. "This is fascinating," she told Captain Morrison over the communication link. "Their technology isn't just behind ours, it's actually getting worse over time. Look at these weapon systems. They're less efficient than the ones we found on their older ships." "What does that mean?" Morrison asked. "It means they've been going backwards for centuries. Instead of improving their technology, they've been making it simpler and less effective. It's like they've forgotten how to innovate." Lieutenant Commander Mary Davis, who was still aboard the Liberty, looked up from her own analysis. "That would explain why they were so shocked by our ships. They probably haven't seen real technological advancement in hundreds of years." Dr. Stone nodded. "Exactly, and there's something else. I've been analyzing their communication patterns and social structures. This empire they're so proud of is built on keeping people from learning new things. The ruling class stays in power by making sure nobody else can develop better technology." This information was relayed to Admiral Carter, who shared it with her senior officers during a strategy meeting. The meeting was held in the main conference room of the Defiance, which was large enough to hold representatives from all 12 human ships. So what we're dealing with, Admiral Carter said, is not just a military threat, but an entire civilization that has been held back by its own leaders. The question is, what do we do about it? Captain Amy Walsh of the UES Thunderbolt spoke. With respect, Admiral, I don't think we have a choice. If we let them continue to oppress their own people and threaten others, we become part of the problem. I agree, said Commander Ben Harper of the UES Sovereign. But we also can't just conquer them. That would make us no better than they are. Actually, said Morrison, I think there might be a third option. What if we don't fight their military? What if we bypass it entirely? Admiral Carter raised an eyebrow. Explain. Dr. Stone's research shows that their power comes from controlling technology and information. What if we simply made that impossible? What if we shared our knowledge with everyone in their empire at the same time? The room was quiet as everyone thought about this idea. Finally, Admiral Carter spoke. That would completely destroy their power structure. It would be like setting off a bomb in the middle of their entire civilization. Yes, Morrison said. But it would be a bomb that helps people instead of hurting them. Instead of ruling over them, we'd be freeing them. The Dominion military won't just let us do that, warned Captain Walsh. They'll fight us with everything they have. Admiral Carter smiled. Let them try. Tony, send a message to the Dominion fleet. Tell them they have 24 hours to surrender and begin negotiations for the peaceful transfer of power to their people. After that, we consider them hostile to human interests. What if they refuse? Tony asked. Then we show them what human military technology actually looks like when we're not being polite. Back on Nexus Prime, Chancellor Korthulum received the human ultimatum with a mixture of rage and terror. The other council members were shouting again, some demanding immediate attack, others begging for surrender. We cannot give in to these demands, War Minister Thex Khanda declared. If we show weakness now, our entire empire will collapse. Our empire might collapse anyway, said Ambassador Velktar quietly. Have you seen the reports from our border systems? Ships are already refusing to follow orders. Some of our own people are asking why we don't have technology like the humans. Chancellor Korthulum made his decision. Send word to all fleet commanders. We mobilize everything. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier in the Dominion Empire. We meet these humans at Kepler Nexus and we show them that there are some things in this galaxy that cannot be changed. And if we lose? Asked Intelligence Officer Nexmore. The Chancellor's compound eyes glittered with determination and fear. Then at least we will have died as we lived, in control. But deep in his mind, he was already wondering if control was something worth dying for, especially when the alternative might be something better than what they had built over 3,000 years of rule. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of humanity and the Dominion Empire, but the future of every species in the galaxy. The Kepler Nexus system had never seen anything like what was happening now. 50,000 warships from across the Dominion Empire hung in space like a massive metal cloud. Every species in the Empire was represented in this grand fleet. Velthari, crystal ships sparkled like deadly jewels. Talon Empire vessels looked like giant metal birds of prey. Hydro Republic ships moved through space like swimming sea creatures made of steel. Supreme Fleet Commander Vexandra of the Talon Empire stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Death's Wing. She was a tall, proud warrior with feathers instead of hair and sharp claws instead of fingernails. Her golden eyes scanned the tactical display showing the positions of all 50,000 ships under her command. This is the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, she said to her second-in-command, Colonel Rixtal. No enemy has ever faced such overwhelming power. Colonel Rixtal nodded, but his voice carried a note of worry. Commander, what if the reports about human technology are true? What if they really can disable our weapons like they did to Admiral Zixathara's fleet? Impossible, Vexandra replied firmly. 12 ships cannot stand against 50,000, no matter how advanced they claim to be. The humans are probably using some kind of trick or illusion to make themselves seem more powerful than they are. But even as she said these words, Vexandra felt a small doubt growing in her mind. The reports from the first encounter had been very detailed and very frightening. Ships that moved faster than physics should allow. Weapons that simply made enemy systems stop working. Technology that seemed to ignore the laws of nature. Suddenly, alarms began ringing throughout the massive fleet. Sensors operators on thousands of ships started shouting reports at the same time. Space itself seemed to twist and bend as something appeared at the edge of the system. It was a single ship. The human vessel was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. It was shaped like a long, elegant blade made of some material that seemed to shift between silver and black. Blue lights ran along its hull in patterns that looked almost alive. It was big, but not nearly as big as some of the Dominion battleships. One ship? Colonel Rixtall whispered. They sent one ship against our entire fleet? On the bridge of the UES Sovereign, Commodore Ben Harper sat in his command chair with a cup of coffee in his hand. He was a calm man in his early 50s with gray hair and tired eyes who had seen many battles in his career, but he had never seen anything quite like this. Lieutenant Davis, what are we looking at out there? He asked his tactical officer. Lieutenant. Claire Davis was a young woman with short black hair who had graduated at the top of her class from the Earth Naval Academy. She studied her instruments with professional interest. Sir, I count exactly 50,327 enemy vessels. They're arranged in a standard battle formation from about 300 years ago. Very traditional. Weapons. Status? They have everything pointed at us, sir. Plasma cannons, particle beams, fusion missiles, exotic matter bombs. If they all fire at once, they could probably destroy a small moon. Commodore Harper nodded and took another sip of his coffee. That's nice. Are they trying to communicate with us? Yes, sir. The lead ship is broadcasting on all frequencies. Should I put them through? Certainly. The main screen switched to show Supreme Fleet Commander Vexandra on her bridge. Her feathers were standing up with anger and her claws were extended. When she spoke, her voice was filled with the pride and fury of a warrior who had never been defeated. Human vessel, I am Supreme Fleet Commander Vexandra of the Combined Dominion Forces. You are outnumbered 50,000 to 1. This is your only chance to surrender. If you do not, we will destroy you, and then proceed to your home world to finish what you started. Commodore Harper set down his coffee cup and smiled politely. Commander Vexandra, I'm Commodore Ben Harper of the Earth Vessel Sovereign. I have to ask, are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Do what? Vexandra demanded. Fight us, because once we start, it's going to be very embarrassing for you, and I'd hate for that to happen in front of 50,000 of your own ships. The Talon Commander's feathers fluffed up even more. You dare mock the greatest military force in galactic history? Oh, I'm not mocking anything, Harper replied cheerfully. I'm just trying to save you some embarrassment. You see, we've been monitoring your communications and we know that your entire empire is already starting to fall apart. Ships are refusing orders. Planets are asking questions about why they don't have better technology. And your own people are beginning to wonder if maybe there's a better way to live. Lies. Actually, no. Lieutenant Davis, please show the commander what we've been picking up from her own empire. The screen split to show communications from across Dominion space. Planets asking for help with problems their government couldn't solve. Military units questioning why they were fighting. Scientists wondering why their research had been restricted for centuries. Citizens asking why other species seemed to have better lives than they did. Vexandra stared at the information with growing horror. How did you get these communications? They're on secure channels. Commander, we've been listening to everything you've ever said since the moment we arrived. In this galaxy, your secure channels aren't very secure. But that's not the point. The point is that your people are already choosing freedom over control. We're just here to make sure that choice is respected. You think one ship can defeat 50,000? Commodore. Harper's smile faded and his voice became very serious. Commander, this isn't about defeating your fleet. This is about showing your people what's possible when you stop being afraid of progress. Without another word, he turned to his tactical officer. Claire, please demonstrate what human technology actually looks like. Lieutenant Davis nodded and pressed a single button on her control panel. Deploying nanobots now, sir. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then one by one, ships throughout the massive Dominion fleet began to go dark. Not destroyed, not damaged, just turned off. Their engines stopped working. Their weapons powered down. Their communications went silent. In less than 5 minutes, 50,000 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy had become floating pieces of metal, but their life support systems continued to work perfectly. Every alien crew member was safe and unharmed, just completely helpless. How? Vexandra whispered, her voice barely audible. Microscopic robots, Harper explained patiently. They moved through space faster than your sensors could detect them, entered your ships through the smallest gaps, and simply turned off everything that could be used as a weapon or for movement. Your people are fine, but your ability to hurt anyone is gone. This is impossible. No technology can do this. Commander, humanity spent thousands of years fighting wars against ourselves. We got very good at it. But we also learned that the best way to win a war is to make sure the other side can't fight back, while keeping them alive to learn from the experience. Harper stood up from his command chair and walked closer to the screen. Your empire is over. Not because we conquered it, but because your own people are choosing something better. In about 10 minutes, every planet in Dominion space is going to receive detailed information about human technology, human medicine, human agriculture, and human government. They're going to learn that there are better ways to live than under the control of people who keep them ignorant and afraid. You're destroying everything we built. No, Commander. We're giving your people the tools to build something better. Something that helps them instead of controlling them. Supreme Fleet Commander Vexandra looked around her bridge at her crew. They were all staring at their instruments with confusion and fear. Everything they had believed about their own power and superiority had just been proven wrong by a single human ship that had defeated their entire civilization without firing a shot. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, Commodore Harper said gently, your people get to choose their own future, and we'll be here to help them if they want our help. The age of the Dominion Empire was over. The age of freedom was just beginning. 6 months after the battle at Kepler Nexus, the galaxy looked completely different. The old Dominion Empire had fallen apart peacefully, replaced by something called the Galactic Cooperative. Instead of one species ruling over all the others, every world now had a voice in how things were run. On the rebuilt Nexus Prime, which was no longer a symbol of control but a meeting place for free peoples, representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered in the new council hall. The building was made of glass and metal that sparkled in the light of the system's twin suns, and anyone could visit to watch the proceedings. Former Admiral Zix Thara of the Velthari stood in the observation gallery, watching as delegates debated new trade agreements. His crystalline body no longer flickered with nervous energy like it had during the war. Instead, he seemed calm and even happy. Standing next to him was Captain Jake Morrison, who had become something of a friend over the past few months. I still cannot believe how much has changed, Zixathera said in his musical voice. 6 months ago, I thought the Dominion Empire would last forever. Now I cannot imagine why we ever thought it was a good idea. Jake smiled and watched as a young Velthari scientist presented her research to the council. People can change when they're given the chance. Your people just needed to remember that they were good at more than just following orders. The humans did more than defeat us, Zixthara said thoughtfully. You showed us possibilities we had forgotten existed. Do you know that our scientists have made more discoveries in the past 6 months than they did in the previous century? That's what happens when you stop being afraid of new ideas, Jake replied. Down in the council hall, President Rick Coleman of Earth was addressing the assembled delegates. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes who had been chosen to represent humanity in the new galactic government. His speech was being broadcast to every world in the cooperative. Friends and fellow citizens of the galaxy, President Coleman said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. When humanity first encountered the Dominion Empire, we were faced with a choice. We could have simply destroyed those who threatened us and taken their place as rulers, but that would have made us no better than what came before. The audience listened carefully as he continued. Instead, we chose to offer something different. Not conquest, but cooperation. Not control, but Freedom, not fear, but hope. Today we see the results of that choice all around us. He gestured to the diverse crowd of beings in the hall. Former enemies have become friends. Former slaves have become leaders. Former soldiers have become teachers and scientists and artists. This is what happens when people are free to choose their own path. In another part of the galaxy, Dr. Rachel Stone stood in her new laboratory on the research station called New Horizons. The station was jointly operated by scientists from 20 different species, all working together to push the boundaries of knowledge. Through her window, she could see ships from across the galaxy coming and going, carrying people and ideas. Between the stars, Dr. Stone called her assistant, a young Hydro Republic scientist named Lactul. The test results from the new medical treatment are ready. It looks like we found a way to extend the lifespan of every species in the cooperative by at least 30%. Rachel smiled as she looked at the data. This was the kind of breakthrough that would have been impossible under the old empire, where research was controlled and limited. That's wonderful news. Make sure copies of all our research are sent to every medical facility in the galaxy. No patents, no restrictions, no fees. Are you sure? This discovery could make us very wealthy. Lactul, money isn't the point. Helping people is the point. That's what we learned from the humans. Meanwhile, in space near the edge of cooperative territory, Admiral Lisa Carter commanded the Galactic Defense Force from her flagship, the UES Defiance. The Defense Force was made up of ships and crews from dozens of different worlds, all working together to protect the new free galaxy from any threats that might emerge. Admiral, called Lieutenant Tony Rodriguez, who had been promoted to serve as her chief communications officer, "We're receiving a priority message from the Deep Space Exploration Fleet. Commodore Morrison has something important to report." Admiral Carter nodded. Jake Morrison had been promoted and given command of a joint exploration fleet that was pushing further into the galaxy than anyone had ever gone before. "Put him through, Tony." The main screen showed Jake Morrison on the bridge of his new ship, the UES Pioneer. But he wasn't alone. Standing next to him were beings that no one in the cooperative had ever seen before. They were tall and graceful, with silver skin that seemed to glow with its own light. "Admiral Carter," Jake said, his voice excited, "I'd like you to meet the Eternal Collective. They've been watching our galaxy for the past 1,000 years, and they have some very interesting things to tell us." One of the silver beings stepped forward and spoke in a voice that sounded like music. "Greetings, Admiral Carter. We have observed the transformation of your galaxy with great interest. The fall of the Dominion Empire and the rise of your cooperative represent something we have not seen in many ages." "What's that?" Admiral Carter asked. "Growth," the being replied. "For too long, this galaxy was stagnant, held back by those who feared change. But humanity has brought something new. The willingness to grow, to learn, to become more than what you were. This is very rare among the civilizations we have encountered." Admiral Carter felt a chill of excitement. "Are you saying there are other galaxies, other civilizations?" "Oh yes," the silver being said with what might have been a smile. "Many, many others. And some of them have been watching your progress with concern. They preferred the galaxy when it was divided and weak. Now that you are united and strong, they may decide to act." Jake Morrison leaned forward on the screen. "Admiral, it looks like we're going to need the Defense Force ready for something much bigger than anything we've faced before." "How much bigger?" Admiral Carter asked. "Well," Jake said with a grin that reminded her of the old days when he commanded a simple science ship, "remember how the Dominion Empire thought they ruled the galaxy? It turns out there are civilizations out there that make the old empire look like children playing with toys." Admiral Carter smiled back. "So we'll need to get better. We'll need to get a lot better. But here's the thing, Admiral. We're humans. Getting better is what we do." Back on Nexus Prime, President Coleman was finishing his speech to the Galactic Council. 6 months ago, we were strangers who met in conflict. Today, we are friends working toward a common future. Tomorrow, we will face new challenges that will test everything we have built together." He paused and looked around the hall at all the different faces watching him. "But I have no doubt that together, we can handle whatever comes next. Because we have learned the most important lesson in the galaxy, that free people working together can accomplish anything. As the council session ended and delegates began to mingle and discuss the future, the galaxy continued to spin through space. In laboratories and schools, former enemies worked side by side to solve problems and make discoveries. On ships patrolling the borders, mixed crews stood ready to defend their new way of life. And in the depths of space, exploration fleets pushed, ever outward, seeking new worlds and new possibilities. The Galactic Empire had indeed freaked out when they encountered that first human battleship, but their fear had led to something wonderful. The end of an age of oppression and the beginning of an age of hope. And somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, other civilizations were beginning to take notice of what humanity and their new friends had built. Some of them were curious, some of them were impressed, and some of them were very, very worried. The galaxy had become a much more interesting place, and for humanity, interesting was always better than boring.